Today's conversation with the hypnotherapist was so enlightening. We talk about what's really causing high-performing entrepreneurs to stall out and hit plateaus and to struggle with delegation because often it's a mindset issue. We have hidden mindset patterns that are quietly capping your performance, and we talk about what shifts are required to continue to scale without self-sabotage.
There's actually a fear of success, a fear of standing out that is far more prominent than a fear of failure or judgment or embarrassment. And those are the biggest blocks that hold people back and keep them stuck in that perpetual cycle of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Freedom Blueprint. I'm Adrienne Green, and today I have with me a very special guest, Paul Salter. Now, on The Freedom Blueprint, we help real estate entrepreneurs escape the grind and create the life and the freedom that they really wanted in the first place. And I'm excited for what you're going to share to help people do that, Paul.
I'm thrilled to be here, Adrienne. I'm excited about our conversation.
Now, for our regular listeners, Paul is a little different of a guest, and I am really excited to bring him and his wisdom here. So, Paul, before we dive in, give us a quick snapshot of what it is that you do.
So I am a high-performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach, and I work with top-level executives, entrepreneurs, and professional athletes to help them get unstuck out of their own way, specifically by helping them to unlearn the collection of beliefs and behaviors that's holding them back from achieving their potential.
I am so excited about this. I think this is very cool. I will share, Paul, as we have been traveling the world, myself and my family, for the last 2 years, I feel like a lot of it has been, I've called it like an unbecoming, or I think an unlearning of a lot of these things you don't even realize are in your brain and affecting what you do. Paul, for you, how did you get into this?
Yeah, so my journey begins as picture a multi-sport athlete, 16 years old, but he's a whopping 5'3", 110 pounds. Everybody is bigger, stronger, faster. All the girls he has crushes on are taller than him, and he is just the runt of his friend group trying to find every competitive edge he can. And fortunately, I fell in love with the weight room, so I kind of checked that box to keep up. My mom really instilled some healthy eating habits in us from a young age. But what fascinated me, and this is when, Michael Jordan was in his prime, soon to be Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, was why are these elite athletes who more or less train and practice the same number of hours as their competitors, why are they so much better? And that fascinated me. And I didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, I can see I began reading anything I could get my hands on that fell under the umbrella of either sports psychology or performance psychology. And as my knowledge into the mind and the inner workings of our brain grew, fortunately, so did I. I can happily claim 6 feet today. I finally got there. But this took me on a path of just being obsessed, candidly, with just how our mind worked. How could I leverage my thoughts and what was going on in my internal dialogue to get where I wanted to be? And that quickly took me down a path originally to kick off my coaching career as a sports dietitian. And I worked very closely with elite college, professional, and Olympic athletes, helping them to simply maximize their body composition and their performance. But what really stood out to me, Adrienne, during this time was the best of the best athletes, they knew how to make nutritious choices. They knew what to do, but there was something in their mind or in their heart that was actually holding them back from executing the knowledge they already had. So with that fascination, I slowly pivoted away from professional athletes and really began to spend the next 10 years or so working with more, we can call them general population, those specifically stuck in the yo-yo dieting cycle. And my approach was, again, you already know how to make nutritious choices. There's not a lack of knowledge problem. It's a mindset problem. It's a belief problem, an emotional problem. So my focus was really sustainable weight loss from the inside out, lose the limiting beliefs and the emotional baggage that's really weighing you down so you can feel, look, and be the best you. But now, here's where things get a little interesting. About 10 years into that journey, I reached a fork in the road. I'd always had this dream of playing professional poker. And one day
I
I'll
love
do
that
it.
you
One
had
day,
dreams. Like, I feel like
right?
so often people can get so focused on the US is such a capitalist culture and there's so many beautiful things about it. And we can sometimes be so focused on making money that we lose hobbies and dreams. And
Yeah.
so the mere fact that you had a dream and that you went after it is so exciting. So, yes, tell us about that and the poker.
Yeah. So I kind of reached that decision point. Like it's now or never. And 99% of the time, it was probably going to be never. So I had to do it now. And I did. So for 2 years, I dedicated myself to playing poker professionally. And I still had my coaching very structured, systematized off to the side. But about 6 months into my poker playing, I felt like I was out studying, out working everybody. I had the coaches. And it still felt like I was lighting money on fire. Not quite ready to give up. I hired my own mindset and performance coach who happened to be a hypnotherapist. In a very short amount of time, I suddenly found myself earning more money, playing for higher stakes than I ever imagined. But most importantly, the impact she had on me as an individual was so positive and indescribable. I walked away from poker. I started to phase out the remaining nutrition clients I had at the time to really double down on the mindset coaching I was already doing. I added the hypnosis credential to my toolkit, and I haven't looked back since.
Love that evolution and that journey. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been an adventure to say the least.
And, for a lot of our listeners, you may not have had the story of being the tiniest athlete in the school, maybe, or at least in your group of friends. You might not have had the journey of professional poker player. And yet, I think all of us as real estate entrepreneurs have had our own evolution where we probably did not at 13 years old think we were going to be agents or lenders or real estate investors. And yet, this is where life brought us, and it's where we're supposed to be, right? Love it. So, Paul, we've got a lot to dig into here. I'm really excited for all the wisdom you're going to share. What I'd like to start us with is plateaus, right? That is something that real estate entrepreneurs often face. They feel like they've been doing the same action. The business was growing, 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 and now it's plateauing. They keep doing the same actions, but it's not causing the same results. From your perspective, what's actually happening beneath the surface in these situations?
Yeah, so believe it or not, there's actually a name for that invisible resistance, that self imposed financial cap, if you will. And in psychological verbiage, it's known as the upper limit problem. And really, all that means is there is an unconscious self imposed limitation to either, how much, in this case, money you can earn, how much success you can have, even how much love you can have. And really, when we start to unpack it, we begin to uncover two big caveats that are associated. Number one, there's actually a fear of success, a fear of standing out that is far more prominent than a fear of failure or judgment or embarrassment. And then number two, and we can unpack both as much as you like, but number two is a core belief. Am I worthy, deserving, and capable of ascending to that next level of success? And those are the two biggest blocks that hold people back and keep them stuck in that perpetual cycle of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
I think that's really cool because I talk about fear of failure a lot. I see that play out a lot with people I'm interacting with and working with. I love this fear of success, something I've heard, but I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So let's unpack this fear of success first, because everybody who's listening is going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I would be fine making $1 million. I would be fine 10xing my income. Why is that not the truth?
We often forget that at our core as human beings, we're a tribal species. Thousands of years ago, if you were judged or abandoned by your tribe and inevitably kicked out, you literally died. That famous saber-toothed tiger had its meal, or you died of starvation without shelter. And we fast forward today, those threats aren't nearly as prominent, but that same visceral need ingrained in our DNA to belong and feel accepted as a part of a group is as real as ever. So if we take the agent listening who maybe right now you're kind of in the middle of the pack on your team in terms of number of deals and transactions closed in a year. Well, what begins to happen if you suddenly start closing at a higher percentage? And at the end of the year, if the average of you and your peer group is 15 deals closed and suddenly you have a year with 25, well, slowly but surely, maybe some of the passive remarks must be nice. I guess you're going to close another one start to come out. And what's happening under the surface is a little bit of tension, a little bit of envy, resentment, jealousy begins to be experienced between you and that peer group as you begin to distance yourself. And because you're so hardwired to belong, what happens over and over is you find ways to unconsciously sabotage yourself, to play small, to dim your light so you can come back into that bubble of familiarity and safety, which is being part of the group that is underperforming compared to where you want to be.
So sad. I'm thinking as you tell me that, or as you explain that, the non-work situation that comes to mind is high school, right? High school peer groups and same kind of thing. We get that cultural pressure to not stand out, right? Like that's such a big issue in high school. And I think a good example of what you're talking about there.
And to go one step further, too, think about it. If you're that agent who suddenly has the breakout year, in addition to the threat of losing the sense of belonging, now there's a perception of pressure, expectation, responsibility. I have to duplicate these results. Wait, was it a fluke? Did I get lucky? So now we've got this, it's more commonly known as imposter syndrome that's present. There's the doubt, the uncertainty, the pressure to repeat. And that can be so consuming that it feels safer to pull back because at least it's familiar and predictable to produce at a lower level.
Right. Yes. I've seen all of that as well. Now, Paul, let's talk about the second piece of that idea of am I even worthy enough? Where is that coming from that we have that belief in our minds there?
Yeah, unfortunately, from early childhood, it's estimated that 95% of our core beliefs are formed roughly by the age of 7. So every single one of us, I like to say, has 4 core beliefs. We have our core beliefs about ourselves, about others, about life. And then the fourth one I personally add in is beliefs about money. But when it comes to beliefs about ourselves, we have to be able to draw upon a large library of evidence to consistently and confidently answer the question, am I worthy, am I deserving, and am I capable? Yet oftentimes a combination of both micro and macro experiences during our childhood and most formative years might indicate otherwise. Maybe you didn't get the attention you needed or the feelings of connectedness and acceptance and belonging from your parents, your siblings, your peer groups, and all of those moments or micro rejections, if you will, begin to plant seeds of doubt, second guessing, and uncertainty that may lead to you questioning if you're worthy of love, connection, success, money, whatever it may be.
That makes sense to me for sure. And I was thinking that's where you were going to go with the answer. So I'm glad that I know something about this. I wasn't completely surprised. But let's say somebody is listening and they feel like they're in a plateau right now. What is one thing that you would recommend they do to address that plateau?
Yeah. So first is get very clear on what are the critical action steps that you have consistently taken to achieve this previous level of growth. If you went from income threshold A to B over the last 6 months, what was the most significant contributing factor? And then it's just a simple audit to begin. Are you still doing at the same level of consistency with the same level of vigor what got you there in the first place? And then from there, you also have to ask, what have you started or stopped doing that is potentially getting in the way of consistent execution of what already worked? Have you fallen victim to shiny object syndrome and started to do too many things? Have you stopped doing some of the bare bone basics that led to your success in the first place? And it's really through developing a consistent practice of reflection and self-auditing, you can start to really clarify where you've gotten off the path and what you need to do to get back on.
If you're a real estate entrepreneur trying to scale while doing everything yourself, there's a better way. The Time and Freedom Starter Pack gives you the exact first steps to reclaim hours each week with real support, including what to hand off, where to start, and simple tools you can put into place right away. Download it for free at adriennegreen.com/starter pack. Now let's get back to the episode. I love it. That makes so much sense because if we're not actually tracking every piece of those actions that we did, right? If we're just kind of saying, well, I feel like I've been doing the same thing, right? I sit down, I do let's say my lead gen 2-hour call block in the morning, like some agents have learned to do. I do that. Or for an investor, well, yeah, I run the numbers on like 5 deals a week or whatever their metric was. What you're saying is our subconscious and these beliefs could go in and actually change how we're doing it. So maybe we don't have that same vigor when we're doing that lead gen. Maybe we're not actually like making as many contacts, or they're not as high quality of contacts and conversations that we're happening. Something is happening in there that's changed, that's weakening the result. Am I understanding that properly?
Yeah, essentially, we begin to fall victim to good enough. And if it was making 10 calls a week or a day, an hour, whatever it is for you, and you start to convince yourself making six is okay. And in that moment, this is kind of a micro form of self sabotage. Like in the moment, it's a one off, okay, that's not going to make or break you. But as that compounds over time, it adds up to pack a massive punch of destructive self sabotage that really kicks you off the path you were previously on that was giving you the results you were experiencing.
Makes sense. And one of the things that resonates with me there is like, I love data because it shares so much and our minds are often misunderstanding reality, right? But if we can find a way to quantify something and have the data for it, then we can see what the reality is and not necessarily what our mind wants us to believe.
Yeah, numbers
So
don't lie.
yes. Now, you talk about destructive mindset programs. How do these show up specifically when someone is maybe starting to scale the business or increase their income? You know, again, let's talk about when people want to have this upward growth. What do these destructive mindset programs come in and do?
Yeah, so anytime you're leveling up and scaling personally and professionally, there's no shortage of triggers in life. I always like to say life is an emotional battlefield. It's not if you're going to step on a trigger or be triggered, it's when. And a trigger in this case can be in the form of an environment. Maybe you're in a room of new agents. You've stepped into the luxury real estate agency realm, or maybe you're in a new income bracket. Maybe it's just something somebody says, a word, how they say it, their tonality, the way they're dressed. But what initially happens with these triggers are visceral, unconscious emotional reactions. And long ago, in a threatening situation, your mind, your brain in this case, formed what's known as a neural association. So that anytime you had a similar experience down the road, it would quickly flag it and alert you. Your nervous system would kind of get locked into fight or flight. So in our case here, when a triggering situation unfolds, you are flooded with an emotion. Could be anger, could be fear, whatever it may be. And that emotion then sets in motion a downstream effect of what lens or belief begins to dominate the situation, how you speak to yourself, what behaviors you do or do not engage in, and then obviously what results you do or do not experience. So these destructive mindset programs that are detonated with a trigger are designed to protect you. So if we come back to the original question at hand around the upper limit problem, let's say you have that breakout year, nearly doubling the number of transactions or deals closed, and you see your total income take home pay at the end of the year. It's going to be exciting, of course, but there also might be a part of you that's like, holy crap. And it might be a wave of anxiety that's washed over. And suddenly that wave of anxiety gives way to the belief, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. This is a fluke. This wasn't me. Then you can hear it in my
Right.
self-talk in that example. My self-talk changes. It starts to dim my light, the amount of action I take, and so on and so forth, until we find ourselves back to the previous year's number of transactions where it was comfortable and we know that we're safe.
Right. Right. Our brains just want to keep us where we have been because they know that that's kept us alive, right? Ugh, when we want to grow and move on, it really hurts us.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is we're wired to survive. And everyone listening here is trying to thrive, not survive. So you're going to consistently come up against this invisible resistance that is a threat to your identity. And unless you do the deep level identity level work to unlearn the beliefs and associated behaviors with that past you, you're going to continue to remain stuck.
Right. So true. And I'm glad you're sharing all of this wisdom here, Paul. Now, what I'd like to dig into next is, as you know, I love helping people with delegation specifically, right? With getting a team member to help take their bottom 80% tasks so they can focus on their top 20%, because that transformed my business when I was an active real estate agent. And now I like helping others do it. So many of our entrepreneurs, they know they need to delegate. They know that they are the bottleneck and the business can't grow because it's limited by the number of hours in their day, but they still hold on to everything. It is so much of it's a mental issue at this point, right? That's why we're talking about it, Paul. You're going to help me help them, right? So what is the identity level shift that someone needs to make to truly trust having support, having delegation and leverage, and let go of doing it all themselves?
Yeah, I mean, really begs the question of unpacking your relationship with control. Someone who struggles to delegate clearly is very fixated on maintaining a sense of control. And in my many years doing this, that fixation and need for control typically comes from one of two we'll call them reasons or experiences. Number one, and perhaps the most unfortunate, is something traumatic has happened to them. And this could be physically, sexually, emotionally, where they've had to navigate a situation to very much protect themselves. So the only way they learn to protect themselves moving forward is to massively maintain a deep sense of control over everything, because that one moment they lost control, something horrendous happened to them. Number two, it comes back to that second core belief I mentioned we all have, is belief around others. Is it safe to trust others? And that, again, is typically found in someone's early experience. If you're listening right now and that's starting to resonate with you, think about how your mom and dad talked about interacting with people. Some of their offhand remarks about, was it safe to spend time with this person, to delegate, to ask for help is another big one, especially with men. We, generalizing here, struggle to ask for help much more than women in my experience. So we have to unpack the origin of, where did you start to feel a lack of safety in asking for help or letting go? And fortunately, this controlling type of propensity, it's learned. So it definitely means it can be unlearned. But those are the two big spots that I typically go with my clients who share those challenges with me. And we're able to really understand when, why, and how it was learned, why it came to be in the first place. And then we do that work necessary to create a sense of safety, asking for help, because you know better than I do. Logically, delegation sounds great. I have to do less. I only have to work in my zone of genius. But the letting
Right.
go is this the emotional, psychological part that requires some deeper work and some patience.
And I love, Paul, how you shared that. Thank you so much. That's really helpful for me too, as I work with people who are struggling with this, because it's so funny. Like you said, logically, everybody can know it's the right thing to do, but emotionally, all these barriers come up, and then they'll throw in all these limiting beliefs that if we step back, we can say, this is not rational at all, but it's just what their mind is fighting to do to keep them where they feel safe.
Yeah, and I'll add one more too that I think is worth mentioning, is sometimes too it comes down to a feeling or belief, I'm not good enough. So I have to have my hand involved in absolutely every aspect of the project. So my name is associated with the success, the validation, or recognition that comes with it. But we both know too, like, that's not nearly as productive or effective and efficient as that person can be if they let somebody else take over it and continue to pour their time and energy into their zone of genius.
Right. Yes. Now, another thing, let's say we have these entrepreneurs, they sign up, they get a virtual assistant, or they delegate in some other way, right? They get an in-person assistant. And then what I see happen a lot is they pull tasks back onto their plate, right? They either don't give up the task in the first place, even though they've hired them, or they bring it back because it's faster if I just do it myself. What's really driving that behavior? Because we know that it's not logical. And how can they break that habit?
Yeah, it's still an identity crisis at its core, this inability to relinquish control. And they got on board with the idea of it, and that triggering situation occurred. They handed over their life's work or something they've done for 1, 3, 5 years. And there's literally, and metaphorically, but literally in this case, something missing. So a lot of times, and maybe you relate to this in all you've seen and coached and experiences, when we have less to do, like, look, most high performers are type A, wired to go, go, go. And when there's the absence of something, that space, that nothingness, that opportunity to be, that's uncomfortable. So we've got to put stuff back on our plate just to do for the sake of doing. And that opens up an opportunity to really learn how to be present, slow down, which are probably words
Hmm.
your listeners hate hearing right now, but are necessary to get to that next level.
Right. Or like we talked about, like, have a hobby, have a dream, right? And it's tough because, like you said, most of the people in this space and that you work with, type A driven, very focused on careers and business. And yeah, that's a good point. Good point. I love that. Now, let's talk about maybe something to help people who are working with a team, and especially if they're working with anyone who's remote, like virtual assistants, remote support. How do some internal mindset patterns affect the way that someone shows up with that team, especially when there's a remote aspect to it?
Terms of being able to delegate more effectively, more consistently.
Yeah, to have it be successful, because so often people either think that there are going to be issues, they just don't know. They don't know because if you're hiring somebody locally, they can just almost learn by osmosis, right? They can follow you around and get an idea of what you're doing. But we've got to be, I think, better leaders, right? When we have a remote hire. So, how would you set up someone for success with a remote team member?
First and foremost, see that remote team member on an even playing field. yes, you are the expert in the task, whatever needs to be delegated. But by changing that kind of natural hierarchy of that's my employee to somebody that's on the same playing field, you give yourself an opportunity to see him or her as an equal, just like you, capable of learning quickly, learning effectively. And of course, always opportunity to sharpen your communication skills, to articulate more clearly, to make sure you have the cadence of accountability and frequent touch points, especially in the early goings. But again, it really comes back to like if you see them on an even playing field, you set that expectation that they're just as capable and committed to doing a successful job as you are. And that can be very freeing versus seeing them as less than or not as capable as you. And that increases that urge to want to take that project back and do it yourself.
That really resonates with me. So thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. And that is something that I've seen because, again, in this virtual assistant space, so often they cost less, right? And we've got this term of virtual assistant that has a certain connotation to it. And so people can think of their virtual assistant as less than because they don't realize they're getting a great value. Doesn't mean they're less capable. And I actually
Yes.
recommend they use a term different than virtual assistant. Like we use it in marketing because it's what people recognize. But when someone's on my team, they're an executive assistant or they're my video editor or my social media manager. They're not a virtual assistant. I feel like that's something that helps with that.
That's huge, and maybe you recognize, maybe you don't, but that's an identity change for them. When you get to see that person's identity as something different, something not less than, I love that, and I think that opens up just a much better working relationship opportunity.
Yes, well, glad to have your validation because you are obviously an expert on so much of this. So thank you. Now, I know we're getting close to the time here. I'd like to maybe talk about continued business growth. So we've talked about some issues people have had maybe starting off a business. And now we talked about, okay, when they get to the point of starting to delegate. Now let's talk about when a business owner is past that stage. They've got some people working for them and it's successful and they want to continue to grow. In that stage, the business is growing. So the stakes are growing too, right? There's more at risk potentially. There can be more fears coming in. How do you see, as you work with clients in this stage of business, things like fear, stress, emotions quietly impact the continued upward climb of that business?
Yeah, I tell my clients and my prospective clients all the time, you have a select number of superpowers, the tenacity, the ambition, the work ethic that allowed you to get to this stage of growth. Phenomenal. Inevitably, however, these superpowers will become your kryptonite if you don't learn to recalibrate. Like, look, Olympic athletes, 100-meter runner doesn't just sprint for 4 years in preparation to sprint for 10 seconds during his Olympic final. There are periods of increased intensity when it's okay to sprint, but there's periods where he or she backs off as well. So for the entrepreneur, the agent, the investor listening, like when you reach that next level of success where you have a team, and of course you still want to go and have a bigger impact and a bigger income, you've got to learn to recalibrate that intensity. And really what that means is understanding when and how to effectively delegate, but perhaps most importantly, it's learning how to manage your energy. And that really can be taken a couple different ways. There's the physical energy that then encompasses the stress management, the sleep management, the diet, the exercise practices. And of course, I'm biased with this next one, but then there's the emotional energy. Like, so many people, again, especially men, I often like, because I was one of them, men are typically emotionally constipated. So we repress anger, shame, guilt, sadness, whatever it may be. And again, for a while, it's fine until it's not, until that pipe bursts. So learning to unearth that repressed emotion and to sit with that and let that go, that gives you an abundance of energy, greatly expands your energetic capacity to be more and do more. And that's really where next level sustainable growth comes from.
Love it. Your answer to next level growth in the business is to deal with your emotions, become a better person by clearing out all that junk. It resonates with me. And so I love that you're sharing that with our listeners. Now we are coming up to the end of our time here. Now, Paul, I know you work with people and help them with things like this. So if this episode has resonated, how could people work with you? What does that look like?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I have a podcast myself. It's called the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. The big spoiler alert here is you don't have to play golf, like golf to find value because it's really a peak performance and personal development podcast disguised as a golf mindset podcast. So if you've enjoyed this conversation, You can go much deeper there. And if you want to have that conversation, you can connect with me on Instagram, shoot me a message there at the Paul Salter, or simply send me an email, paul@unstuckyourselfmindset.com.
Love it. And guys, of course, everything there is in the show notes. So thank you again, Paul Salter, for joining us on this episode of the Freedom Blueprint. This has been educational and enjoyable. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Adrienne. Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Freedom Blueprint. I would throw out there, if you know a real estate entrepreneur who would benefit from hearing Paul's story, go ahead and shoot this episode over to them now, and then join me again next week for another episode of the Freedom Blueprint.